Hello, and welcome to Alta Live. I'm Matt Haber, Alta Journal's newsletter editor. Today, it's my pleasure to be speaking with Alec Foster from the Los Angeles-based group Women Against Gun Violence. Alec hosts the podcast Bullet Points, and today he'll share his personal experience and talk about the ways we can stop the scourge of mass shootings and gun violence in America. But first, for those of you who are new to Alta Live, thank you for coming today. This is a weekly chat show created by the editors of Alta Journal, a quarterly print magazine about California and the West. Our current issue, which I have right here, is dedicated to the desert, and you can find it at an independent bookstore across the West. You can also get it directly from our store at altaonline.com. If you like what you hear today, I urge you to become a member and get our gorgeous, award-winning magazine sent to your home and access to everything on our website and our archive. The very best journalism, fiction, poetry, and storytelling with a West Coast point of view. You can get a membership for as little as $3 a month. And for $50, you get the 4 issues of the magazine sent to your home, a selection from the California Book Club, and an Alta Journal baseball cap that will make you the envy of your friends and neighbors. After this chat, we'll send you an email with a link to join, as well as Jessica Klein's profile of Alec from the magazine, a link to the Women Against Gun Violence website, a video link for this chat, and anything else that we mentioned today. If you'd like to ask a question to Alec, we invite you to submit it in the Q&A area, and Alec will answer some of those at the end of our talk. So to get us going, we usually ask where you're watching us from. Please tell us in the chat where you are. I am in Oakland. Alec, where are you today?
I'm in Compton, California.
Great. So tell us a little about your life, Alec. The problem of gun violence has touched you personally, and I want to hear about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So on December 8th of 1997, my brother was tragically taken from this life. My mother was taking Evan, my brother, and myself to Darby Park in Inglewood, California, to pick up a soccer trophy for Evan and sign him up for basketball league. And in the process, earlier that evening, there had been gang violence between local Blood and Crip gangs, and Crip gang members' life was lost, and they were seeking retaliation against the Blood gang. So they went out seeking to enact revenge on anyone. It didn't have to be a specific person, and it ended up being that they targeted a man in a red car because it was the rival color. And in the process of targeting him, my mom sought to maneuver the car out of the way in that Darby Park parking lot, but got caught in the crossfire, and Evan was tragically murdered. And myself, 10 months old at the time, I had injured to my left eye and from bullet shrapnel, and ended up having to have a cornea transplant, which was successful. So I do have pretty good vision, but I'm forever impacted by that, obviously. And yeah, that was kind of the tragedy that became a jumping off point for my family to get involved in gun violence prevention work, and is still involved in that type of work to this day.
It's an awful and very sad story, and I'm sorry that that happened to you and your family.
Yeah,
But you've turned it into something really positive. So tell me about some of the work that you do now.
Yeah, so now I currently work for Women Against Gun Violence as an administrative assistant, largely a researcher as well. And then, as you mentioned, I host the podcast Bullet Points that we send out every month. And yeah, it's been kind of a full circle moment in a way, as Women Against Gun Violence was the organization that was there in support of our family when this tragedy happened for us. Back
How old
in
an organization is it?
It's about 30 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that just speaks to how long this problem has been here, even before 30 years ago. But how does it feel to, see the news headlines and the social media feed with these stories that come out? It seems like almost every day. But at the risk of sounding glib about it, I mean, it must be very triggering to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is. I think it brings up a lot of emotions for everyone, but especially for me as a survivor of gun violence. I think it is triggering in a sense. not necessarily triggering flashbacks or what I felt at that moment, because I was so young. I don't really have a whole
Yeah.
lot of recollection of that, but a lot of anger, frustration, sorrow for the lives that are lost and the communities that are forever impacted by this gun violence. Yeah, I think it's tremendously triggering.
And I think one thing with the frequency of these headlines and these terrible stories is that it's really easy because everything scrolls by you so fast, or like the channels change so quickly, is to
Mm.
forget that there's always so many humans impacted, people who's lose their lives or lose their siblings or their parents. And
Yeah.
um, as a survivor, how would you like people reading about these stories to think about the people in them and be aware of them? What can we do as consumers of the news to be more sensitive and more keyed into this?
Yeah, I think it's probably become easy to feel a little bit numb to the
Hmm.
news about gun violence. As you said, it feels like something is happening every day that you read about or hear about in the news. I think that was something that because I actually got involved with WAGVA when I was younger too. I actually spoke
Hmm.
at one of their awards luncheons.
How old
Uh,
were you then?
I was 10 years old,
Wow.
I believe. Yeah.
That's pretty
I was
brave to
young.
get up there in front of people and talk about what was probably the worst experience of your young life.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were an example for me in that way. They got involved probably within a year after Evan's life was taken, and
Hmm.
speaking in youth prisons and speaking to them about how they can change their lives around for the
Hmm.
better, and involved with Women Against Gun Violence and other speaking engagements. So I had those examples
Yeah.
before me, and
But
I
still,
think,
10 years
yeah,
old is very young to be up on the dais talking about that stuff. That's really brave.
definitely, definitely. But how I concluded it was saying, kind of in answer to your question, that as normal civilians, we shouldn't look at gun violence and say, I'm glad that hasn't happened to me, but more so, what can I do to help?
Yeah.
And I think that sentiment is still very apt to this day. I think a lot of times it's sad, it's scary when you see the news of another shooting, but people tend to kind of go in and
Hmm.
focus on themselves and not necessarily think about that could have easily been me or my community. There's really no safe haven from gun violence currently. So I think whether it's becoming an armchair activist or becoming a full-on activist, I think using your voice, even if you haven't been a victim of gun violence, to lend to the cause of gun violence prevention, because a lot of times the burden of gun violence prevention discussion falls on survivors
Sure.
or victims.
Which
Yeah,
doesn't seem fair, right? I mean, like, yes, you have personal connection to it and probably a real passionate view on it, but you've got to deal with the normal stuff of grief, the regular day to day, and then for you to have to
right.
shoulder all this other stuff is it's a lot to ask of people who are already hurting.
Yeah.
So tell me about what the group does and what are some of the actions that we can get involved in as participants or volunteers or observers.
Yeah. So as you asked, and the group has been around for about 30 years, largely run by women, but men have become involved in recent years as well, as you can see.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think some of the major initiatives that we're pushing are ballot stop bullets. So the importance of voting in your
Hmm.
local elections,
Hmm.
obviously, and then in national elections as well as safe gun storage is a major initiative for us. We know that there are responsible gun owners out there, but not everyone is, and you're not aware of everyone who is a gun owner as well.
Hmm.
So providing people with information of how to talk to their neighbors, their friends, whoever, about safely storing their guns so that
Hmm.
um, children are not having access to them, and potential accidents don't occur as a result. I believe two-thirds of gun deaths in this country are accidental gun deaths that have
Hmm.
happened from a gun that's been taken from the home. So that's a major initiative for us with our talk project, and then also divestment project, which is been a more recent one that we've been pushing. We have a website, divestforourlives.org, where
What
people
does that mean exactly? Divest.
So divesting is essentially pulling your money away from a specific entity
Mhm.
for a targeted reason. So with us, monitoring where you're spending, where you're banking, and where you're investing,
Ah,
where you're putting your dollars, as the NRA
mhm.
is funding a lot of politicians, and there are companies that are giving money to these politicians' campaigns, and these are essentially helping to fund the gun industry, and then as I said, the investing aspect of it, companies that are donating to the gun industry,
Mhm, mhm.
taking your investment dollars away from those companies. So that's largely what it's about, getting people to think about where their money is going.
Yeah. Let's zoom out a lot and talk about just the culture of guns in America.
Mhm.
There are guns everywhere in the world, but it seems like we're having a real hard time with them here.
Mhm.
People are using them on each other a lot.
Mhm.
What do you think that is? Is it what's to blame? Is it different pop culture things? Is it different ways of living? Is it politics? What is going on? I mean,
Yeah,
it's so huge. I don't even know how to begin the question, really.
right. I think there is probably an unhealthy obsession with guns in the country. I mean, mass shootings are a uniquely American issue. Other countries have them, but at a much smaller scale. We're significantly more frequent with the mass
Yeah.
shootings than any other developed country in the
And we've
world.
got access to guns that are very powerful, right? These machine guns and these automatic rifles and
Absolutely. Specifically, the assault weapons that are largely used in a lot of these mass shootings to
mhm,
take innocent lives at a rapid rate. And that's a major reason why we push for an assault weapons ban, which we had in 1994 for a 10-year period, and
mhm.
we saw it decrease the amount of lives lost as a result of gun violence, but it unfortunately expired in 2004, and then that's something we're pushing for now to reintroduce.
So for
Uh,
20 years, basically for almost 20 years, it's been waiting to be renewed and it hasn't been.
it hasn't been, yeah.
How many administrations have gone by since then that no one's been able to push this through? That's amazing.
Right, and it goes to your question as to why the guns are such a big issue in America, and I
Yeah,
think largely it is because the issue has become politicized, as you questioned.
right. Yeah, and
I
I feel
think
like guns have been equated with our freedoms, but so is
Mhm.
going to school and not getting killed, and so is going to the mall. That's a freedom that we should defend more strongly than the freedom to have a gun, I would imagine.
Exactly,
More people want to go to church or want to go to the supermarket than want to own guns.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, you're pointing to all these places that should be normal, safe spaces for us to
Right.
just operate and live, but have turned into
War
one
zones.
way battlegrounds. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's really difficult. Like you said, they're hanging on to that Second Amendment right as far as the right to bear arms, but that was a very old amendment that had to do with well-regulated militias. That it was
And
a
guns
different
back
time
then, you
then.
had to
Yeah,
clean them and put the gunpowder in and load it, and now you just press a button like it's nothing.
exactly. Yeah.
So how do you propose that we talk to people who may not agree with us on this? How do we bridge the gap between people who see the world so differently from each other?
Man, that's such
I know, the big one.
that's such a
Solve this
difficult
problem for us, Alec, right now.
right. That's
It's a
such
hard
a
one, but
hard
how
loaded
do we
question.
start that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting it at a level of humanity, I
Hmm.
think talking to each other as human beings who I believe none of us would like to see our family compromised by gun violence. All of us would like
But let's
to
not be
operate
euphemistic, not
normally.
comparmised, killed or maimed.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Like we should
Absolutely.
not use euphemism anymore. It's too late. We got
Yeah.
to be serious about it.
100%, 100%
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, but I think you have to level with it and be honest about where the country is. I think a lot of times that Second Amendment right is what gun rights activists tend to lean on. But majority of the time, you're not under attack in the safety of your own home. But yeah, I think just talking to each other as human beings rather than I'm right and
Yeah.
you're wrong and your way of living is wrong, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think just leveling with the humanity of each other.
That's an extremely generous and empathetic point of view, and one that you probably had to fight to have inside yourself because you had this experience and you lost
Right.
someone, and your face was hurt, your eye was hurt. So
Right.
how do you find that empathy and that generosity to reach out to people? That's a hard thing, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I think for myself, I think you have to lead with love. I think, as I said, it does make me tremendously angry to
Hmm.
see the impact of gun violence on a day-to-day basis, the amount of lives lost. But I think it's harder to galvanize when you are attacking and you are brazen. I think there is a
Hmm.
time and place for that. But I think leading with love is the most important thing to get the ears of people and the
Yeah.
hearts of people. For some, they may be too far gone in their ideology. But I think for me that's an important way to um, get more people on your side.
Hmm. And I think
And I
another
think,
thing you could do, sorry, cut you
yeah,
off, but another thing you could do is information, which is what you do in your podcast. So I want to hear about
absolutely.
that, but please go on with what you're going to say.
Absolutely. I think stressing that your right to bear arms is not greater than my right to live is
Hmm.
also one way to approach that conversation with someone who is of an opposing view. Because yes, you do have that right to bear arms, but um, I have a right to, as you said, go to the grocery store, go to school, go to church,
Yeah.
without fear of someone coming in and taking my life or my friends, families, communities' lives. So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, so let's talk about also the information piece of this. The Bullet Points podcast is kind of, well, you describe it to us since you created.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay, I didn't actually create it. I
Okay,
took it on about a year ago. Our executive director, Margot Bennett, was initially the host
great.
of it. And essentially, it's a podcast, 15 minutes or less, sharing with the public the um, hottest topics in the gun violence prevention movement, and ways that they can get involved. But as you said, it's an informational podcast, so keeping people informed with what's going on, whether that's legislatively or
Hmm.
that's in the news about um, the recent shootings, the statistical data about
Hmm.
it, and then sometimes as well, adding a little bit of perspective to it, of my own, and my personal feelings and thoughts
Hmm.
about it. And yeah, that's essentially what it's
Do
about.
you have
Yeah.
any plans to expand it or any kind of hopes to bring more of your personal story or other people's personal story into it?
Yeah, I think bringing a more personal level to it is something that was important to me. I took it over in March of last year, so I've been doing it for a little bit over a year.
Hmm.
But I think bringing other survivors' perspectives in there as well, and potentially experts in
Yeah.
their field surrounding gun violence prevention. I think it would be an awesome addition to it as well, and something we'd be interested in doing. Yeah,
Yeah. So you're a young man.
I am.
I am an old man. Tell
Don't
me,
look
tell me
too
what
old.
your well, I try. Tell me what your plans are and kind of where you see yourself and how your activism and your commitment to this cause is going to be part of your life going forward and what you want to do.
Yeah, I think uh, activism, no matter if I'm with Women Against Gun Violence or another organization, I think it's something, the gun violence prevention aspect was always going to be something that's important to me, important to my family as it touched our lives personally. I'm always going to seek to speak out and speak into my local community, and if I'm blessed with opportunity on a national level as
Mhm.
well, I seek to speak to the back to the local youth, younger
Mhm.
than youth
Yeah.
myself,
So you could
in
be the
my
old man for
community.
once.
Right, right. But talking to the local youth about
Mhm.
the importance of gun safety, the importance of voting when they become legal age, and becoming a one issue voter if that's something that's important to them, if gun violence is something that's really important to them as well. I think that's a major thing for me is getting involved with the youth in
Mhm.
my community and at a larger level, because I think the youth are and the younger generation is going to be the ones that help to continue to turn this issue around. The antiquated idea of the Second Amendment right to bear arms. I think that's something that the youth are going to passionately help change the narrative around. So
And I think we see
uh,
that a little bit, right, with the kids from Parkland and some other young activists.
absolutely,
It'll be interesting to see what they're able to accomplish as they get older, and the voter, population shifts more towards their group than the older group that's going to be leaving,
yeah,
dying, retiring. Do you
right.
see any chance for yourself to be in politics, or do you have any interest in that?
I don't know. I don't know. For a long time, that's not something really that I've been interested in. I've kind of, I guess, been soured by how politicized an
Sure.
issue of life or death has become. But I also realize the importance of passing important legislation to help
Mhm.
keep us safe. So it hasn't been something that's been on my mind, but potentially maybe I wouldn't close any door at this point. I'm 26 years old, so
Yeah,
there's time. Yeah,
yeah. And so, how's your family doing? It's been a long time since this thing happened.
yeah,
Um, I'm sure they live with it every day, but how are your folks dealing?
yeah. I appreciate you for asking first and foremost. But yeah, I think definitely not a day goes by where we don't think about Evan and the man he might be today. On the whole, I think we're doing really well. My dad is he's a pastor
Mhm.
in Community Bible Church of Culver City, and my mom works in after school care program that is dealing with at risk youth. So kind of along the lines of where my interests are as far as
Yeah,
helping out the youth, but we're very community based family, and gun violence prevention is something that's always going to be uh, first and foremost issue that's most important to us, because we do not want other people to be infected by this problem as we
yeah,
were. Yeah.
yeah. Well, they must be really proud of you. I mean, you're doing great work, and you're just beginning, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
pull some of these questions from our audience here.
Sure.
One audience member asks, is there a mental health or waiting period or background search component in the advocacy that your group does to make it harder for people to buy guns? Do you
So,
work with the kind of advocacy around mental health issues and making waiting periods longer, more stringent?
um, legislatively, I can't say that we've done specifically that with mental health. I think the informational stuff that we do as far as the summits and seminars that we provide for people to learn more about gun violence prevention. We have included mental health professionals to talk with our
Mhm.
constituents about that, um, but not on the legislative level. I think mental health is an important aspect of it. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed in uh, June of this past year has a large component of mental health programs
Mhm.
and funding that were a part of it as well. So that's a huge component of the issue as well too. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just going to have to be so many different things that work together, right? So many
Mhm.
different ways of supporting people and ways of preventing actions by some people. It's not, there's just not one magic thing that's going to solve this problem.
Correct. Correct. It's
And
multifaceted for sure.
yeah. So another question here, and this may be a good one to end on, I think,
Okay.
is what is one thing that each of us can do to support your work and the work of your organization?
Yeah, I think um, one, you can search out these local organizations. It doesn't have to be Women Against Gun Violence specifically, but local organizations that have been doing the work and been in the fight for years. as they're the ones that are the quote unquote experts in
Mhm.
the field, but using that to make your voice heard as well, whether that's volunteering yourself and demonstrating when you have these organizations like March for Our Lives. You mentioned the Parkland students
Mhm.
who started that organization. Whether that's demonstrating and marching with organizations like them, whether that's donating to these causes, that's talking to um, your inner circle, your friends, your community, your family about safe gun storage and uh, locking up their guns. Whether that's reaching out to your local legislators and your state senators when um, legislation is up for vote, encouraging them to vote on life-saving gun
Mhm.
legislation. There's many ways, and that's something you can go to WAGVA, Women Against Gun Violence's website, and find more
Which we will
information
link
about
to
as
in the
well.
email.
Yeah, but yeah, there's plenty of ways for you to get involved as someone who hasn't been personally affected by it, but someone who cares deeply about it as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the people in the comments actually said, we're all victims of gun violence.
Exactly,
That,
that's a great way to look at it.
and I think that's true. I wonder, as a last question, are you hopeful? And if so, what gives you hope every day about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that Women Against Gun Violence does as well is we send out action alerts every week of how um, everyone can get involved in the fight, and I believe the latest one was about hope fatigue, actually. And it is hard, I believe, at times to stay hopeful when it feels like we have taken some steps back. But you can point to small victories of progress. As I briefly mentioned, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was one instance where we got people across party lines to agree on federal gun legislation for the first time in nearly 3 decades. So that in itself is progress, but much more needs to be done. But I think you can look at those types of things as small wins and reasons to be hopeful. And I think the new wave of younger politicians who care about gun violence as a number one issue for them, and I think you can look at this younger generation as an instance to be hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say you give me hope. I mean, I think that you're working on this cause and you're connected to the right groups and you're beginning to build your national platform. I mean, that's something to be really happy about and hope for the best on that one. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Alec, for joining us. This has been Alta Live, and I want to thank everybody again. We are going to send out a link to the video of this. It'll be posted as well. And we'll have links to Women Against Gun Violence website, to Jessica Klein's profile of Alec from the magazine, and anything else that we mentioned today. Thank you so much, Alec, for being here and sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Have a good one, everybody.